In this training session, we're going to look at some of the tools that the EventSentry Management Console offers for working with filters. So filters are obviously an integral part of EventSentry, and most installations have a lot of them, so it helps to know how we can efficiently work with them. So the first thing I want you to be aware of is the Find feature. So if you click Find, then you can search filters based on various properties. So for example, event ID 4688, when a process starts, we can click that and we immediately see the list of all the filters that we have in place, including the package name that match that event ID. So for example, we can click that too, and then EventSentry will bring us directly to that filter. We can take a look at it. There's a few more options available here. You can search for thresholds, filters that only have schedules, and also restricted to a group, for example, to only show filters that are assigned to a specific group. You can also look for computers here if you have a lot of computers and you want to locate that computer in the list. Another really useful thing is the ability to test filter rules. So you may have created a filter and it doesn't work. Well, that happens to everyone, even advanced users, because sometimes there are very subtle filter properties that may prevent a filter from working. If we look at the application event log, we have, of course, our filters here. And we can pick any filter here. Let's just say here's an error filter, service monitoring, logged by EventSentry. And I want to make sure, I want to see, well, which filters would process this event. You can right-click this and hit Test Against Filter Rules. You also have that option here. And then EventSentry automatically pre-populates this Find dialog. So it's a testing dialog. It's similar to the Find dialog, but a little different. And you can change this, of course, if you want to. So if you want to substitute a different event ID, then you can do that. And then you just hit the test button. And EventSentry will search through your filters and show you all the filters that match. If a filter is not matching, if you want to investigate further, you can do the same thing here again. And you can click the verbose option. And if you do that, then you will see every filter that would be processed and the reason why they didn't match. So you can see various reasons here. Event ID doesn't match, event log doesn't match, severity doesn't match, source doesn't match, and so forth. You can also simulate from which computer this should be processed. So here I'm the local host EventSentry is the default, but I could switch this to DC01, or let's just say SRV01, looking at the same event ID. Actually, we're not. Let's go back here. Test against filter rules, and let's pick that server here and run a test. And we'll see here that the matching is a little different here. So it still goes to the database, but those two other filters that were listed before are not listed here. And that's simply because that email notification package, if we look at the assignment, is not assigned to those servers. So it does take that into consideration. So that's pretty useful. If you want to test filter rules, but you don't see the event, then you can go to the Tools menu, click on Utilities, and do the filter rules test. And there you can manually type in all the information. The only thing you cannot currently test are filters that are filtering based on insertion strings. So if you have a filter that is looking at specific insertion strings of an event, that's not something you can test with this utility. When it comes to managing filters, if you click on event logs here, you can also export filters to JSON, of course, to the registry, but also to a CSV file. So you can call this filters.csv. And then you can open that in Excel. And you can see all the filters here are exported. So that's good if you want to search for something, if you want to just have a backup, if you want to create some sort of a report, etc. When it comes to working with the actual filter, I'm going to show a little trick that makes it a little easier to work with the custom event logs, the application and services logs that Windows has. So in our database consolidation package, we have a filter that consolidates all non-security events. And we'll see again, there's an informational icon. So there's a list of custom event logs listed here. Let's just say we want to add more logs here. So this is already a pretty good list, but there's the various use cases. And let's just say we wanted to also consolidate the group policy log. There's a fair amount, there's 30 events per hour, so there's definitely activity there, maybe useful for troubleshooting. So how do we do that quickly? You go back to this custom event log tab, you hit plus, and of course it's maybe a little tedious to find it here in the list. So what you can do is you first expand this list, and then you just start typing group. And then we'll actually automatically filter the list, and then you can simply add it to the list here. I recommend using notes whenever it makes sense, especially for filters that have a very specific reason to be there. That helps if you revisit that filter later, or if other people look at the configuration. You can also sort filters, which can make it a little bit easier to work with those filters. You may have seen in some of the other packages that you can also use folders to organize filters. So this is something I also recommend. So for example, here we have false positives that stores a couple of exclude filters. So that way you can nicely separate the exclude filters from those include filters. Of course, you could also create a folder here for modules, for example. Another trick you can use if you want to make sure that a folder appears on the top of the list when you do use the sorting functionality is to prepend these folder names with a space. You can't really see it, but there's a space here, so that forces that folder to be on top. Again, the ordering doesn't really matter for exclude filters. Even if the exclude filter were all the way at the end, it would still apply to all the filters in this package and other packages. And finally, I would also recommend to use descriptive names when it comes to filters. So if somebody else looks at it, here we have filter timer test. So this immediately implies this is a test package that can probably be deleted. But again, even for packages, we can add descriptions. And yeah, here, calculator launch, calculator exit, that makes sense and explains it pretty well. So I would refrain from complicated names, or sometimes you can also add event IDs to a filter name. It may also make sense to name the filters so they can be sorted more easily, but it definitely makes sense to keep the filters organized, make the names descriptive, and add descriptions whenever that makes sense.